Yeah, I mean, this is something I actually want to discuss now, which is even though he's not going to play in the game, apparently, we have to discuss the context of Dev1ce and NiP because he's not just not going to be there. And obviously, he was one of the players who helped carry them to this point. If people don't know, it was a very, very tight game that they won over G2 with the stand in. But also the fact that he isn't there, but he's also not replaced by someone who's comparable, really. Like, one of the other things I think people don't understand about why a lot of analysts are very critical of some of these players coming in is because the best example is Loki and Astralis, right? If this guy really was like sort of the Danish Zebu and he was the next incredible talent who was like hidden away and he was finally being, we'd know that. Like the scene, people, by the way, someone like T here would have done a video where they'd have like broken it all down. Like, you've got to see this guy's gonna be incredible. Like, people have an eye test. We know when the next ones are coming. And these guys, I've got to say, like some of these players I've never heard of before they joined these teams. Like, there was no hype. Like when that guy Lucky was in Tricked, like, okay, I heard he was an okay player. He seemed like one of the better players, but there was no like thing like, oh, wait till he gets to the top 10. It's not like Monacy, for example, where there's a reason why G2's probably going to pay like a king's ransom and buy this guy who's never essentially played an official tier 1 game, right? On the other side of the equation, T, if we talk now about NiP, let's do that context first. Like, they don't have Dev1ce, they've got this other guy in, right? They still made the final of the tournament. There's still clearly some elements of the team that can work, right? How good do you actually expect NiP to be? Do you think they can give a proper challenge here? Can we craft some kind of angle where not having Dev1ce isn't the end of the world? Is it a problem for you?
I think there are technically win conditions. Technically, there are win conditions. It's a lot reliant on Rez being amazing. He's had some struggles being amazing in a couple of prior events, but he's actually looked solid enough at this one. It's going to rely on Hampus to find a lot of opening kills, get up to a lot of shenanigans, trickery, nonsense, the things he does to find his openers. He's going to have to be more successful than he was against G2. He actually got, roasted by Nico, because everyone does in opening duels, really. And yeah, it's got to be something more than the 4v5 show after Hampus goes down, because a lot of teams are able to recover from it, but if you're down Dev1ce, you're not maybe got Rez as guaranteed to be as good. You got Esatag, who's still finding his footing. Hampus needs to be good. That's essentially what it is. He can't rely on having outstanding performances from the rest of them. Fuzi, he can hit shots when you line him up, get him in the right places, but there's a reason no one's screaming about him on the Young Ninjas. He's solid at that level, not standing out. The fact that he was able to keep up in that previous game was great, but as Dust mentioned, that was Kenny S. This is Zywoo. You're going to rely on your riflers in this game quite heavily.
I can't believe I'm just wasting my... Here's the thing. Normally, I would never do this. But because I have to actually have the Twitch chat open for the ESL event in case they start the stream and I have to throw it, I saw a random comment in Twitch chat. And even though normally I despise Twitch chat, it's just like the domain of morons. It's like the most low IQ. There was a rare example of actually a funny, stupid, copy pasta type thing that made me laugh, where this guy just goes, it put hey, hi, I am Petra. I am searching for my son. He calls himself Fizzy. He said he is going to play with his friends in pajamas. Please help. He is only 13 years old. You know what? I'll give you that one, Twitch chat. That was good. That was okay. Well played. You got me on that one. That's a rare example of where you said something funny. Okay, Dust, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at NiP, it's just one of those things where there's just so little that jumps off the page that gets you excited about the team. I mean, obviously, they can't do anything really about Dev1ce not being able to be there and Fizzy coming in, so I'll just kind of leave that one alone. That's outside of their control, whatever. But the bottom line is if you just take them as a whole, their map pool is busted as fuck. There's just not a whole lot there to be excited about. They're very clearly weak on Mirage. They don't play Vertigo. Their Overpass and Dust 2 are also questionable. So their map pool doesn't really give you a whole lot of hope. With Dev1ce being gone, that puts even more weight on Rez, and it seems like he's the only one that can consistently really perform and give them the impact that they need. I will admit that Hampus has played pretty solid overall this event. He's doing pretty well when it comes to some of the opening kill stats and also having some high assists throughout the year, so it seems like he's able to have value as far as fragging goes and setting up the team. But as an in-game leader, I think you really have to call him into question because their T sides are just awful, man. I wasn't totally assured of it, but I was talking to Maui Snake, and I've someone I respect a lot, and kind of comparing notes and just watching some film. I was watching some film the last couple of days to prepare for this, and man, when I watch them play, it's just unreal, just how sloppy they are, man. It just seems like they're so disjointed. They don't even really seem on some of the maps to even have a solidified default where you kind of know what roles people are going to play and what they're responsible for. It seems like it could just fluctuate round and round on who's lurking and who's actually trying to create openings, and it just seems disjointed. I'm sure that part of it is trying to phase Fizzy in. I'm sure that's hurting things a lot. I'm sure the fact that you have the whole Swedish thing with Esatag probably doesn't help either. But even prior prior to that, they were having their issues. It's like one of those things where when you look at it overall for the year, for the last 6 months at least, they actually have like pretty good like overall rankings when it comes to like round win percentage and like how they are able to like win 5-on-4s when they have the advantage and how they're able to trade and things of that nature. But then they're like towards the bottom of the table on the T side if you just filter for that. So it's like all the value they get is typically on the CT sides, and you can kind of see it throughout this tournament, man. This team is incapable of having a good T side unless they start hot. If they get like an early economic advantage because they win pistol and they don't fall prey to the force buy, then yeah, maybe they can get a T side going. But outside of that, their T sides just never really get them much value. They really are heavy on the defense. And when you juxtapose that against a team like Vitality, who can grind out a T side, they've proven that throughout this tournament multiple times already. Even just in the microcosm of this playoff, they've been able to do it to Gambit and Virtus Pro. It just makes you really like lack faith in them.
Yeah, let's do it then, because obviously this is another convo that you have to have about NiP, because basically from the major onwards, this was the most glaring flaw of the team. They would have double-digit CT sides, and then they would still sometimes lose some of these maps and games. So clearly there is something going wrong. And I'll even add this in, even though the game, because of the M4A1S, has somewhat become, again, slightly CT-sided on most of the maps if you go and check. If you actually ever play the game, like I'm assuming some people do, the T side is still incredibly strong in theory. Like, think how cheap the weapons are, the CT economy can get fucked and just get rolled for round after round. So there's clearly something going wrong here if you can't get any T rounds to me. And I'm actually getting a vibe with Hampus. This is why I want to open this discussion up and bring T in on this one. One of the vibes I get that's really weird is it reminds me of Infuria when they, like the whole time, like Art was the in-game leader, right? I never really felt it because I was like, actually, here's the thing. I don't think what Art was doing with all those crazy CT pushes and all that aggression, I don't think it was wrong, actually. I love it. It's genius in some ways. I love it when Hampus does it. I think he's one of the best CT players of keeping you on your toes, like keeping the fucking offense honest. You can't leave a hole open or he'll just start lurking and flank round. I love that style of play. My problem is this. I don't really like it when it's the IGL that does it though. Like I like a player like that and I want to just turn him loose on like the outskirts of the map or something, and then I'll call the rest of the game, and it's like you're just like a guy, you're like a JW type character, just some wild card creating havoc for me, but I've still got my game plan. The problem I have is I feel like if you're that type of player, it's really fucking hard to call the whole T round and keep the whole game in your mind while you're essentially looking for crazy timings for yourself or looking for some like solo push you can do. Like, what do you think on this angle, T? Because obviously they're in similar scenarios. Like Hampus technically is the IGL. I know earlier this year when they had ZTR, they had that whole theory where he called on two of the maps. By the way, not a great sign already when your IGL's like giving up maps. But where are you at on this? Because I noticed this seems to be one of the main areas people critique the team.
I think that T side struggles to generate openings for a start. Like usually we saw in the past, Dev1ce finding opening picks on certain maps was excellent. When he was on Astralis. On NiP, I haven't got that same vibe. I haven't seen as much of that, maybe freedom for him to dictate his own picks to the team, to Hampus. And then Hampus himself, he's so much better at getting opening kills on the CT side. Then on the T side, yeah, they struggle with finding the openings. They struggle to then convert those openings. They actually have a terrible 5v4 win percentage, which is absurd. And that part of that might have been to do with the fact that they did have academy players who weren't as comfortable hitting headshots quite the same level, or weren't as comfortable with the right spacing and the trading that needed to happen. But at this event, yeah, the T side hasn't got much better. I didn't think much of the S-tag move when it happened. The theory was, he's supposed to be a super high level player in terms of his, his mentality and his intelligence, but you slot him in, I've not seen much of a change. If anything, the team's got a slightly bit more awkward because of his eventual transition from Danish to Swedish, which I've got very conflicting reports as to how quickly that's supposed to happen, by the way. Like I've heard a week and they're fluent, and then I've heard from other people 2 months, which seems long for such a similar language. But either way, it hasn't improved that side of things. And I don't know, you've still got this guy we don't really talk about, Plopsky, who kind of has been terrible, but also recently has looked good occasionally. I don't really know what to do with him. I don't know what his role is fully, and I don't understand if he is going to be good or if he's supposed to be good. It's a bit of a mess when it comes to the T side.
It's weird because, like, again, I was trying to think of this too, Thorin. Like, why are their T sides so bad? And I tried to sit back and watch some film and just kind of like see how they played out their T rounds and their philosophy. And the thing is, they do have a couple of situations where they can be effective. Like when they're able to be a little bit like bursty, like if they can get a little bit of map control for free, or if they just try to load up one area of the map kind of early in the round and just try to go for like some type of like pop flash, like bursty type play. They're able to thrive in those situations because, Hampus is willing to kind of be trebuchet forward. They can kind of let let Rez trade off of that. You know, Kyojin seems to be like a soldier in the sense that, or not Kyojin, sorry, I don't know, Plotsky, my bad. It is like kind of willing to like go in and he does have, like you were saying, King T, like he's got some pretty good like first bullet accuracy in his own right. Like he's able to kind of flex his aim in those situations where he doesn't have to think too much. He could just kind of follow a good pop flash and just kind of use that to get his grounding and be able to deliver some aim. So they're kind of good in those situations, but I feel like where they struggle is like in the early round because they just seem really disorganized as far as just like their roles team. They really fluctuate like way too much for my liking. There's really no consistency. Like the only exceptions like Overpass, where I feel like their roles are like really well solidified and they kind of have an idea on how they want to take map control and how they want to play out around. But when you look at them on, say, like Inferno or some of these other maps, they just look like, I don't know, like things just like swap in and out so often that it's like, how could you ever get comfortable and get that muscle memory and kind of get those protocols in place if you're constantly changing like who's doing what and kind of just like what the overall macro of the round is going to be. Like maybe they can thrive in some of these like bursty like micro moments, but when it comes to just like dictating the pace of the overall round, it seems like they get a little bit lost for my liking.
Yeah, I will say the Essetag move has underwhelmed me a little bit because I actually personally, I think here's the sad thing. Essetag's gone into this scenario where because of the shenanigans with Astralis, where essentially they did flip him in the most cynical way ever, they brought him into a team that was way better than him. He only had to play something like 40 maps or something, but he looked fairly good and they won Pro League, and then they were able to flip him to Cloud9 and he got an enormous amount of money, hence the whole price tag meme, etc. But if you take away the fact he did get an arguably overrated while in Astralis, I always thought elsewhere in his career he was like mildly underrated. Keyword mildly. I'm not saying he was like some outrageous like snob or something. It's just if you ever look in most of his teams where he wasn't supposed to be like a big star or something, he was just supposed to be part of the supportive structure. He was usually a pretty good player. Seemed like he knew his role. Seemed like a fairly intelligent player. I'll even add, you notice when he was in Astralis, part of how they flipped him was they sort of made him look like Zipnix because he was kind of the replacement for Zipnix standing in when he was having his time off. The problem is, I actually think I underestimated this myself, the whole language thing when he came into NiP, because I was thinking when they signed him, right, that get rid of all the Linus problems, which by the way, it does then immediately make it like, sorry, Plopsky, you're next in the fucking spotlight, mate. But he's luckily sort of skidded, he's drafted behind fucking terrible Linus play for months and survived. And then there's the whole angle of like, I thought, right, this is what you need. You need a veteran, guy with good comms, guy who knows the game, can fill in some of the holes. The problem is, this whole language thing, I think probably is real. Like, I agree, T. When I watch him play, he looks a bit out of sorts in the team. He doesn't look like he's slotted in and find like, oh, here's what I need to do in the squad. And if people don't know, as far as I know, because basically the problem is this, because we're really asking individual Swedish, Danish, Norwegian people, do you understand the other one? Realistically, they're not all going to have the same trend, right? If you asked like 1,000, you'd get a better sense of it, but we're going on like Reddit, etc. As far as I know from pro players, it goes like this. In theory, they can all, if you just gave them like a piece of paper, basically if they were in an escape room and you said, here's a piece of paper with one of the other languages on, it tells you how to get out the room. They'd all be able to get out the room is what I'm aware of, right? Because they'd have, as long as they need to read it, even if they have slightly different letters, it looks fairly similar. They could sort of by process of elimination. But the point is, that's if you give them unlimited time and it's written down, it doesn't change and they don't have to remember it all. I've heard apparently if they talk though, it's like the most mild version is it's like dialects where you can get dialects in the same country that are so extreme you can't always tune into the guy's sort of twang as to how he's saying it. But then also obviously they have slight words that might be slightly different and therefore that could throw off the meaning. So as far as I know, in theory it should be a fairly quick uptick. Like it should be a couple of months and he could already be like quite close because essentially he's just learning to listen to them and say a few things himself. But the problem I have to say is I think what I underestimate myself there is logically he's a player who should be a massive part of your comms if he's going to play that sort of role. You want him to be like integral to whatever the IGL's doing, what the other players are doing, because in that scenario, like you're not like, here's the thing, if he was just an AWPer, yeah, you don't have to say that much, mate, just go and shoot people with the AWP who can probably figure this out. But I do feel as though that move, it hasn't quite made it yet. Like I could believe it's going to get there. I'm sure they're not just going to bail on it now. It doesn't seem like a team that spends loads of money. But I feel like there's been a problem with it. Dusty, where are you at on this? You've obviously seen this guy over his career. He's been in many different teams over the years. What do you think of this move they made? Because they obviously thought on paper, I saw Dev1ce's and Essetag themselves making very big proclaimments. Like, I think Essetag implied they'd become number one or something. Dev1ce was like, this is the player we needed. It's an obvious move, What do you think of this addition?
I think I can buy the idea that they think that that's the player that they needed, but that's not the only player they needed. That is the player you're picking up, in my opinion.
Yes.
Like, I think that they also struggle in the in-game leadership department. That's something that probably needs to be addressed at some point. We're already seeing them scramble with like coaching changes from reports that I saw. So it seems like they're trying to change their back office a bit to help facilitate that. But I'm not sold that Hampus is supposed to be the one that's leading this team, in my opinion. I think he can maybe still bring value as like an entry fragger or something like that. But as an IGL, I kind of question it. And I think also they kind of lack another like just really consistent rifler that can deliver. Like, I think Rez has certainly been able to fit that billing, and obviously Dev1ce is meant to be kind of their star, but I feel like they could really use that third player. That's why I got super excited when I heard that the rumors about Dupree perhaps coming over. Of course, that's not happening now, but as far as the Esatag situation in particular, like, the problem for me for Esatag is I've always thought of him as like just kind of like that Swiss Army knife player that's like pretty decent. You know, like, he can fill a lot of different roles on a team. He's traded roles throughout his career multiple times. It seems like he's the kind of guy who's willing to go with the flow and kind of just like fill in the gaps. And you need a glue player like that. I think that he can certainly bring a lot of value. But I think the bottom line is it's obviously his stock got massively inflated in Astralis by just standing in for a brief moment in time. The whole Cloud9 situation, which was a bit unfair to him, to be honest. That I don't think that was like the best place for him to really thrive with all the complications that team had. But I just think that in some regards, he's like, he's good enough, but the problem is he's only good enough in the perfect scenario. And this is not the perfect scenario because there's a language barrier problem. And so you're going to have to work through that to get him where you need to be. Like you said, Thorin, he's probably a guy that, because he is kind of that other veteran on the team next to the Dev1ce, you want him to be super involved in communications and like helping with mid-rounding. I mean, he's a guy who did some temporary calling, if I'm not mistaken, in some of the Danish teams he played on prior to making his way over to like standing in for Astralis and eventually over to Cloud9. So it's like you probably could really use his insight in his experience, and you can't really tap into that very much because of the language situation. So, I mean, I don't know if that is going to improve over time. Hopefully it does. It does seem like they're probably invested in him long term, and so maybe this is like a moot point in a few months. But for right now, in this moment, in this match, when you're already dealing with like trying to phase Fizzy in last second and try to get him involved, and now you're dealing with Esatag also struggling, I think it does like leave like a really big hole probably strategically for them.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.